Today I'm going to take you through a fun and simple leveling build for a rogue which you can use in Season 1 or the Eternal Realm. It is built upon ranged attacks and makes use of imbuements and movement skills. This build will be able to take you through from level 1 all the way to level 50 and complete the first capstone dungeon to unlock World Tier 3, and it can also transition into a great endgame build at higher levels once you move through World Tier 4. First, I'll be going through all the skills and gameplay mechanics, and at the end of this video I'll also go through the aspects you'll want to unlock in your Codex of Power and some other ones to keep an eye out for on loot, as well as what caged hearts to use if you're playing in Season 1. Now, going through the skill bar, the core skill that I'm using is Penetrating Shot. Now I've taken the modifiers on this skill that will slow all enemies. It hits by 50% for 3 seconds when cast with full energy, and the second modifier dealing 10% increased damage per enemy it hits when piercing. So this will be your main damage skill, and for its best impact you will want to make sure that you have the trick shot aspect in use, which you can unlock in your Codex of Power by completing the Bastion of Faith in Hazar. For the basic skill I'm using Forceful Arrow. Now you'll be using this to build up your combo points to deal more damage with your core skill. You want to try and make sure you're building up your combo points with this before firing Penetrating Shot whenever possible in order to maximize the damage you're dealing. It also helps with being able to knock back non-elite enemies when they are close, which helps with some CC on the mobs of enemies you're facing. For my next two skills I have Poison and Shadow Imbuement. Now these imbuements are critical skills that you need to pair with your other skills in order to maximize your damage. You always want to ensure that you have one of these applied before going into a fight, so that you're ready to deal some damage and you already have it on cooldown. Now, as much as possible you want to make sure you have one of these imbuements on and be using it in conjunction with Penetrating Shot. The Poison Imbuement skill is going to be used for your main damage against elite and bosses. However, whenever you are versing mobs of enemies and your Shadow Imbuement is on cooldown, you'll be wanting to swap into Poison Imbuement as well. Now for the Shadow Imbuement, this is your skill you use for your AoE mob clearing. It affects enemies and then they will explode when they die, dealing extra damage to surrounding enemies and also implying vulnerable onto those enemies. The last two skills on my bar are the movement skills. Now this mainly help with positioning and to get out of CC. The first one being Shadow Step, which will help you get out of CC, and it can also be used to move to an elite enemy to stun them for 2 seconds. The second skill is Dash, which is your main movement skill to help you with your positioning, to move away from enemies and ensure you get the best damage from Penetrating Shot. You can also use it with implying imbuements when required as well. Now going into the gameplay and mechanics of how all this comes together. Once you encounter a mob of enemies, the first thing you're doing is to have Shadow Imbuement on your weapon and start hitting them with basic skill Forceful Arrow to build up your combo points. Once the combo points are full, you can fire Penetrating Shot with the Shadow Imbuement to help clear large amounts of enemies. This can then be repeated for the second charge of that imbuement. At this point you may need to rotate to your Poison Imbuement and do the same rotation with Forceful Arrow and Penetrating Shot. Use Dash whenever you need to move away from a group of enemies or to line up a better Penetrating Shot in order to maximize your damage. Also, don't forget to use your Shadow Step to either get out of CC or to help stun an elite for a couple of seconds during a battle. Now, if you're playing Season 1, the 3 caged hearts I suggest for you to use are the first one being Tempting to Fate. This heart means you gain 65 to 85% increased critical strike damage, but your non-critical strikes have a 40 to 45% reduce of damage. Now, just make sure if you do use this one that you do have a decent critical strike chance as well. The second one is the Clip Shot, which means you have a 20 to 40% chance for your Cutthroat skills to slow enemies for 8 seconds, and your Marksman skills to knock back enemies. The third one is the Wrathful Heart the Vial. Your attacks have a 5 to 15% chance to apply all imbuement effects at 90 to 100% of normal potency, but this is a bit harder to find in early game, so if you can't find this one for a while you can use the Pekana Heart, which means critical strikes will electrify enemies, which means lightning can arc between them and cause lightning damage. Now, in terms of the boss battle, the same mechanics and skill rotation will be used when you're fighting bosses. You will need to ensure you use your movement skills to dodge as much damage as possible, and for your damage you need to ensure you're using Forceful Arrow to build up those combo points, and then use Penetrating Shot with your Poison Imbuement for 2 shots, and then rotate into your Shadow Imbuement, and just keep this rotation up until you've defeated the boss. Now in terms of aspects, this build is not reliant on all of them, but as you level up you want to try and at least put some of the ones on that you can get from the Codex of Power if you can afford it. So the aspects in the Codex of Power that you want to unlock in a reasonable order: the trick shot offensive aspect to greatly improve the damage for penetrating shot, the rapid offensive aspect for the increased basic attack speed, the offensive aspect of the expectant for the increase in core skill damage, Edge Master's aspect for the increased damage when at full resource, aspect of arrows for a 10% chance for your marksman skills to create an arrow storm, energizing aspect for some energy regeneration, aspect of the might for some damage mitigation, wind striker aspect for increased movement, enshrouding aspect to help with some further damage mitigation, and then aspect of disobedience for some damage mitigation. Now all these can be found on the Codex of Power, so they can be easily obtained, and just try and put some of those offensive and defensive skills on when you're able to while leveling up. Now in terms of the skill tree, I have linked the build in the description, so have a look at that to see what the skill distribution looks like. Now please do remember to hit the like button for the video and also subscribe for more content from my channel if you found this useful.